Chapter 18. Tommy. I don't need any more love, and I certainly don't need any more suffering, Richard told the luthier. The luthier waited silently for Richard to continue. Other than a great violin, I can't think of anything you could possibly find in this world or make in your shop that I need. Then it becomes my job to find out, replied the luthier. The luthier turned around and looked up. As though he had heard something, Richard thought while following the luthier's gaze. The wood hanging from the ceiling was swinging in a gentle breeze created by large fans built into the walls. Some of the pieces were clicking together, but Richard didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Yet, the luthier seemed focused on one particular set of wood. Thinking of the stories he had heard about the old master violin makers, Richard commented, I've heard that Jacob Steiner tapped the trees with his walking cane to see how they sounded, or, some say, to see if they had souls. It is true, he did, answered the luthier as though there were no question about it. What do you hear, luthier? The luthier turned. When they are ready. As if to change the subject, the luthier stepped up on a stool and pulled down two pieces of wood hanging directly above his head. He held one between his thumb and middle finger, then tapped it with the other piece. It produced a beautiful ringing sound that echoed through the shop. Wood is a wonderful thing, the luthier commented. It is almost unbelievable what it can tell us if we listen, and amazing what it can do if handled properly. The luthier grasped the backs of two chairs and offered one to Richard. Richard relaxed in the seat and carefully examined some small metal scrapers lying on the bench while the luthier spoke. Richard knew that the old violin makers, as well as the finest coffin makers, had used them to finish the wood instead of sandpaper. He admired their different shapes and keen edges, while the luthier's words became philosophical. Trees are marvelous things, once one gets to know them. Yet so few ever take the time or know how. As if to answer the question forming in Richard's mind, the luthier added, There are many things in life that are only experienced when we close our eyes and clear our minds of the outside world. Close your eyes and listen, Richard. What do you hear? Come on, Ricky. Close your eyes, pleaded Tommy, while walking backward in front of Richard at school. Richard stopped in front of the vice principal's office. That's an old joke, Tommy. I'm not falling for that one. Tommy and Richard were sharing a locker until the maintenance department could finish repairing and repainting the one that Richard had been assigned to. It was over a month after the start of the next school year, and the 12 months of supervised visitation were finally over. The trouble was, Richard hadn't seen Michelle since the first week of summer vacation. A lot had happened since the night they exchanged Christmas presents by the fountain. It is his to give, Elaine insisted while driving home from the mall. We gave him the violin and the bow when we bought them. So he could play them, replied George, not give them away. We haven't even finished paying for them. That's true, she admitted. Do you know how much that set of nickels is worth? George looked from Elaine to Richard sitting in the back seat. Richard didn't answer. None of them really knew because George had never added it up. The first 3 nickels from Richard's grandfather were the most valuable, and George had bought most of the others one at a time on his business trips. He never mentioned how much they cost, but Richard remembered that one of them was $500. He remembered it because his parents had argued about it for a week. $500 for a nickel? Elaine had complained, coming as close to yelling as she ever did. He needed it to complete the set, his father replied. After pulling into the garage, George turned toward Elaine. That set is worth at least $5,000, not including the ones my father gave him. It surprised Richard when Elaine responded, "It shouldn't matter the cost. It's the thought that counts." His father stared back at her, speechless. When the arguing was over, the decision was made. Michelle could keep everything but the Bergonzi and its bow. It really was okay, because between Michelle and Richard, it really was the thought that mattered. They began putting back on the weight they had lost, and before long, Richard and Michelle were beginning to look like their normal teenage selves again. Richard's mother even bought Michelle some hats to wear while her hair was growing back in. "They're actually rather stylish," Elaine commented. Richard had gone with them to the store, and after watching Michelle turn around in front of the mirrors, he agreed. They were allowed to see each other twice a week for 2 hours, as long as one of their parents was always in the room. It wasn't as bad as they thought it would be. Usually within 15 or 20 minutes, Richard's mother would sit at the other end of the parlor and catch up on her reading while they quietly talked. Michelle quickly learned the songs that Richard had bought, then they played them together, Michelle on the piano and Richard on his violin. When Richard went to Michelle's house, they played with her dog and read books, while Margie did her housework or the paperwork for Joe's business. They later figured out that they could do all of their community service hours together if one of their parents was willing to go with them. It didn't take long for Richard and Michelle to talk both of their mothers into donating time at the retirement center and the library. They were even allowed to spend some of their supervised time working in Mr. Edwards' yard, where he and Margie became good friends. Michelle's and Richard's lives finally settled into a routine again, and both of their parents were satisfied with how things were going. All in all, they were happy, but they were never left alone together, and with time, it did change things. They could only talk about sitting under the 2 trees and diving off the docks. They had no private place to tell each other their most secret thoughts, and they could only imagine riding their bicycles through the town, asking questions. During the next few months, a mellow, numb feeling took over, and when the bad news came, it didn't hurt nearly as much as it might have. In fact, they seemed to take it as just another addition to their melancholy. Michelle's father received a large contract 1 week before school let out. The job was in another city and scheduled to last all summer, maybe even longer. Since it was temporary and he needed Michelle's mother to take care of the books, they planned on leaving their house vacant and living with Michelle's aunt and uncle for the summer. Besides, they have a daughter named Crystal. She's only 1 year older than you, and you could get to know each other and become friends, Margie had informed Michelle just before they left. Richard and Michelle were allowed to hug each other goodbye, and as they parted, Michelle whispered into Richard's ear, "When I return, we will be free." Richard wrote his first letter to Michelle that afternoon. He had never written a letter before, other than thank you cards and notes to his relatives. He struggled with each word and read every line a dozen times. He couldn't seem to figure out what he wanted to say. So he said the same things that he had told her 1,000 times before. He signed it at the bottom, "Yours truly, Richard." He received Michelle's first letter less than a week later. Michelle wrote about driving for hours with all of their belongings piled on top of them in the car because it wouldn't all fit in the trailer. The city was much larger than their town, with big, wonderful stores and exciting places to go. She also wrote about Crystal, her cousin, who looked a lot like her, only older, and how Crystal liked boys. She signed it, "Your friend always, Michelle." Richard felt bad when he read "Your friend always," realizing that that was the way he should have signed his letter. He wrote her back again without saying anything new, and so it went throughout the summer. Michelle wrote Richard about all the exciting things Crystal introduced her to, and eventually of their adventures together. Richard's letters got even shorter because everything he wrote was just the same thing, over and over again. He just didn't do anything new without her. George was out of the country on business trips, and Elaine never did anything when he was gone, so Richard didn't go anywhere the entire summer. Richard walked down to the docks one afternoon to see if anyone wanted to go swimming with him, but no one was there that day, and he never tried again. He wrote his last letter to Michelle just before the summer ended. It read, "Everything's okay. Your friend always, Richard." Michelle kept writing, though her letters became more reserved. She never asked questions or said anything about Richard not writing back. When school started in the fall, Richard had a harder time than ever fitting in. There had been some teasing after the night at Salty Pete's, but he was too numb to feel it or to care at the time. That school year, without Michelle, Richard felt everything, and it was enough to keep him totally ostracized. "Come on, Ricky, close your eyes," Tommy repeated. He was still standing in the middle of the hall. Tommy seemed all right, and they were sharing a locker together, but Richard just didn't know him that well. "Of course, I don't know anyone at school very well," he realized. "We're right in front of the office, so it couldn't be that bad, and maybe I'll get a laugh out of it too." So Richard stood still and closed his eyes. "Keep them closed, no peeking," cheerfully encouraged Tommy, "and put your hands behind your back." With a half-hearted smile, Richard placed his hands behind his back and waited. It had been a dull afternoon anyway. The instant his hands came together, two boys grabbed his arms from behind and wrapped duct tape tightly around his wrists, while a third boy brought a woman's bra down over his head and around his chest. The three boys held Richard while Tommy took out some bright red lipstick and smeared it all over his mouth. When he was finished, they drew back together and cried, "Girly boy," while pointing and laughing. They finished by pushing him down and running away. Richard started crying while he lay squirming on the floor trying to get up without the use of his hands. Boys and girls gathered around, but no one helped him up. After finally struggling to his feet, Richard looked at all the faces staring at him. Most of them were laughing. Some tried not to, but they just couldn't help it after looking at the lipstick on his face. Richard headed down the hall as fast as he could. He turned around so he could push the large swinging doors open with his hands and ran out. He stumbled and lost his footing on the stairs. Then, just before his body curled up and hit the ground, he saw Michelle, standing in front of him on the sidewalk. "No, God, please not today," he silently prayed after coming to a stop at her feet. "Why today? Why not any other day?" Richard lay curled up with his eyes closed, wishing that his life would simply end. Michelle could hear the voices inside the school, and she told him, "Get up, Richard. Let's go." She helped Richard to his feet and quickly brushed him off. Then they silently walked away.